FHS Season Tickets.
Welcome into another episode of FHS Season Tickets. I'm Michael.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Miles.
And today we have a guest on the show, Kyle Koster from The Big Lead. Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Like you said, Kyle Koster from The Big Lead. One of those sports blogs that's still kicking, still around, still pretty independent. Cover a little bit of everything. Happy to be on with you guys.
Yeah, we're excited to have him on. You can also catch him on The Big Lead Live with Ryan Phillips. It goes live at different points throughout the afternoon on Periscope. And if you follow The Big Lead on Twitter, you'll see that. But first off, starting off on why Kyle is on the show, we actually made a bet about the Denver Broncos and New England Patriots playoff seeds when Denver was, I believe, 3-1 or 3-0, and New England was, I think Denver was 3-1 and New England was 2-2. Kyle, what went wrong for the Denver Broncos?
The question is what didn't go wrong? They just have a black hole at the quarterback position. Their defense, which has been the strong suit for so many years, just kind of like is MIA. It's just, it's like a snowball rolling down a hill. All the bad stuff is compounding. You have John Elway calling out people at the media. From top to bottom, it looks like the organization is a mess. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and they've got, you go into Paxton Lynch, and Paxton Lynch is crying on the sidelines, and all has been lost. It's not a good sign. But just to go back to the bet, my belief wasn't so much, you can get in a lot of trouble doubting the New England Patriots, and I wasn't doubting them. I know that a lot of people thought that the sky was falling early in the season. I just saw that their schedule was going to be difficult, and they would have to go to Denver. They would have to go play a tough neutral game against the Raiders in Mexico City, and Kansas City had already beaten them. So it was my belief that someone in that division would rise to the top and win the tiebreaker over the Patriots. But obviously we've seen everybody in the AFC West has just hit a wall. The Chiefs, who looked like world beaters early in the season with a couple MVP candidates on the horizon, have completely fallen off. The Raiders are a mess, a lot of infighting, and the Patriots have just done what the Patriots do every year, and that's right the ship and look like the best team in football outside of maybe the Philadelphia Eagles. So I'm happy to own this one. I was way off. When you do what I do, you put a lot of takes out into the ether, and some of them come back to bite you, and all you can do is own it, because once in a while you get one right, and once in a while they really stink. And this one could be an all-time bad one for me, because who knows if the Broncos are ever going to win a football game this season, and then who knows if the Patriots are going to lose.
Yeah, we have no room to talk, as me and Nick are Browns fans, Miles Steelers fan.
Yeah.
But the Browns have been even bigger mess than Denver Broncos have.
For sure.
Do you guys want to ask any NFL questions right now?
NFL, usually the NBA is, at least me and Miles' favorite, but the NFL, always get every year. I enjoy the playoffs, but does it seem like there's a lot more parity with the NFL, at least for my favorite sport? It doesn't seem like there's that much parity in the league. In the NFL, it seems like there's a new top team in the league almost every week. With the analysis, and now it's Philadelphia Eagles. So can you talk on the parity in the league and how that's this season compared to other seasons?
Well, I think that the NFL has always had an element of parity to it. You see the teams that finish in last place. It seems like there's always a team that finishes at the bottom of their division that jumps up and makes the playoff this year. Yeah. The next year, I should say. And teams that are down are usually not down for long. Now, speaking as a lifelong Lions fan, and it sounds like I'm talking to some people very familiar with the Browns' misery, there are some outliers there. But you do see teams that are down usually get back up. I think what's different about this year in the NFL is that you look at the landscape, and teams that are not traditional powers and haven't been successful for many years are now at the top of their divisions looking good. Like we said, the Eagles have been down for a little bit. Now they look like the best team in football. In the AFC, you have some non-traditional teams in the playoff hunt, like the Titans and the Jaguars. You don't really know what to do with them because who knows, it's been so long since the Jaguars have been in play. And then the Vikings at 9-2 are a surprise, as well as the LA Rams.
Yeah.
So it's like you have the best teams in football are kind of these unproven entities that we don't know what they're going to look like when they get to the playoffs, or if they'll be able to continue to have the steam going into the playoffs. So in that respect, it's really interesting, and you are going to be in a situation potentially where teams that have proven themselves, like we could be talking about the Falcons as a wild card team, we could be talking about the Seahawks as a wild card team, and it's just going to be, they're going to be the underdogs on the road against teams that have been better than them. But again, we don't know whether to trust them in the playoffs. So I think what you're seeing in the NFL is a great amount of uncertainty headed toward the playoffs. And I'm like you, the NFL is not my number one sport. It's not my favorite. But I think when you get in this part of the season, when you can really look at the standings, I love the graphics they show during NFL games where you always get the in the hunt over there on the right, and you can kind of see what teams need to do to make the playoffs. I think that the NFL has a really nice down the stretch playoff chase because it's easy to understand. So I think that's what you're seeing in this year. But I do believe that the parity in the NFL is, I think that's one of the hallmarks, and it's always there. And I don't know if I would say that this year is any different. I guess if you look at the AFC, like can you name 4 good teams in the AFC? It's pretty difficult. You have the cream of the crop with the Patriots and the Steelers on top, and then outside of that, it's like, what do you got? You just got a lot of teams that are just sort of there.
Yeah, that was something I was about to mention, how much stronger the NFC is than the AFC. I would say besides those top 2 teams that you mentioned, I would probably take 7 NFC teams over the third best AFC team, whether you want to make the argument for Tennessee, Jacksonville, Kansas City, or whoever else you want to make the argument for. It's kind of bad in AFC. But Miles, do you want to ask one more NFL question before we move into college football?
Yeah, being a Steelers fan, I am very critical with them still, and from the looks of it, I really do agree with you guys. It looks like it is going to be like that normal matchup with Pittsburgh and New England, but then there's always that little rusty look from Kansas City. And I've noticed how the Steelers were sort of bad against bad teams, and I just wanted to know your opinion. I don't know if it's maybe the way they're coached as far as their week prep for the target that week, but I just wanted to know your opinions on their season and what you think of them and all that.
Well, I think that the Steelers, obviously, you look at the offensive side of the ball, and they have talent to burn. Le'Veon Bell, proud Spartan here, love to watch him run. Yep. Antonio Brown, another Michigan guy, love to see him perform. But you do get the sense that they're toying with these teams. I think that Sunday night was a perfect example against the Packers where they played down to their competition, and you're wondering what's going on. It almost seems like they're getting a little too cute on offense. It doesn't seem like it should be that hard for Ben, but he has not been as impressive this year as I think he has in last year's. Missing his deep ball is not the threat that it once was. I think that they are still kind of missing that speed guy on the outside. I mean, I know that he's had some big plays to Juju Smith-Schuster, but I just, it's not the same play as the Mike Wallace just go deep. If I'm a Steelers fan, I'm worried not so much about them playing down to inferior competition. I'm more worried about the inevitable, which is the matchup in the AFC Championship, likely against the Patriots, and more than likely, these two teams will play. So it's like who gets the home field. If they got to go to Foxborough again, I just don't like the Steelers' chances. The way that the Patriots have exploited the Steelers' defense recently is something that I think they'll be able to do again. I mean, you're coming off a game, Brett Hundley, you gave 28 points to Brett Hundley. That is cause for concern. So I think that the Steelers have a lot going for them. I'm less worried about them getting getting tripped up early in the playoffs. It's just, you're headed toward that buzzsaw, which is the Patriots, likely on the road, and you're going to need something out of the ordinary to happen in that game, whether it be a punt return, a fumble, the ball bouncing your way, a punt off someone's leg. It's kind of, I feel like you're going into Foxborough with that situation. I would expect the line to be like 8 or 9 in that game again. So that's kind of how I see the Steelers. There's worse places to be. I think it is good that I don't think anybody in the AFC is going to jump up and get them in the playoffs in Pittsburgh. Like, are you really afraid of the Titans coming in? Are you afraid of the Jaguars? No. So you probably kind of have somewhat of an easy path to the AFC Championship. You know this more than anybody. You're in the conference with the Patriots, and that's just kind of a losing proposition, because in a way that is your Super Bowl every year. That is going to be the hardest step in your path to winning it all. So it's, again, not much different from the other years. And the Steelers, I got some questions about them, and when you stack them up against the Patriots, I don't think you like what you see. What, do you agree with me, or are you feeling any confidence that maybe this year they can jump up and get their old nemesis?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Seeing defensively against Hundley, you as confident as he played, you cannot let that happen. They definitely do play down to their style of the game, and that's mainly on the defensive side of the ball. And then you have, Roethlisberger with a down. It seems like he's slowly going down, and it's been more the receiver in terms of the throw. And the Patriots are still the Patriots. That's the problem, and it is not going to be an easy win. But at Heinz, it would be a lot easier. I agree with you.
Yeah, and they do play. I think the game's at Heinz Field. It's in week 14, I do believe, where I think New England comes to Pittsburgh. So the winner of that game, you would presume, would have home field advantage for the playoffs. So that almost seems like a must-win for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting.
Yeah, now we're going to jump into college football, and the college football playoff rankings have been the topic of discussion by so many people. Kyle, I know you wrote an article saying that Ohio State beats Alabama on almost every available metric. So you think that if Ohio State beats Wisconsin in the Big Ten title game, that Ohio State would jump Alabama and be the 4th seed in the college football playoff?
Well, actually, that was I didn't write that. Jason McIntyre wrote that.
Oh, you just
that's all right.
retweeted it?
I have kind of conflict. We can get into it. I have very conflicting thoughts about this situation. The big debate, you hit the nail on that. What everybody's talking about is the potential situation of that last spot coming down to Ohio State or Alabama, and I am so on the fence that I can't really give you a strong take and a feeling either way. I think that Ohio State would have going for them, obviously, is they would have more quality victories. They would have Wisconsin. They would have Penn State. They would have Michigan and Michigan State. And I will say, as a Michigan State alum, I do think that Michigan State win is not really as impressive, or the Michigan win. I think both those Michigan teams aren't these juggernauts. I think that Ohio State should have mopped the floor with them, and the fact that they struggled against Michigan, actually, I think almost hurts them in my view. And if you look at what the committee has valued throughout the years, it's always been about the quality wins, and they've been willing to push your loss aside. It's been all about who have you beaten. That is the end-all, be-all. And Ohio State would win that matchup against Alabama easily. But the problem is, it's Alabama, and they have that name, and they have the recognition as the number one program year in, year out. Anybody who watched Alabama this year, would say that they were vulnerable, but they're still a good team. Their great transgression was losing last week at Auburn, a team which may end up being number one in the rankings, or at the very least, a playoff team. So how much are you really going to ding them for losing on the road to another playoff team? Actually, in my opinion, I think what happens is that in that situation is the committee takes Alabama over Ohio State because their loss is much more impressive than the 2 losses that Ohio State had. You want to talk about 15 points at home to Oklahoma, 31 points on the road against an Iowa team that just a few weeks ago let Purdue come into town and push them around. It's just a real perplexing resume for the Buckeyes. The real question, where it gets really dicey, let's say that TCU beats Oklahoma and you have a 2-loss Sooners team against a 2-loss Buckeyes team, and the two have already played this year, and Oklahoma went into Columbus and pushed the Buckeyes around. How are you going to sit there with clear eyes and a clear conscience and say that Ohio State gets in over Oklahoma when the two have played? So I think that the road is a little trickier for Ohio State than a lot of people realize. What do you guys think? I'm sure you guys have gone back and forth on this one, but in my mind, I think that the committee would give it to Alabama, even if personally I might lean a little bit more toward the Buckeyes. And the broad thought I have about both these teams, I think I said it last night on Twitter, is if you're Alabama and you're Ohio State, you are the two biggest name brand programs in the country. You get the most respect of anybody, and at the beginning of the season, your path to the playoff is clearly defined. Yes, you can lose one game, but if you lose one game, you better be sure to win the division or win your conference. And short of doing that, you don't have any complaints. You don't get to sit here and cry on Selection Sunday that you didn't get in, because it's not. Your path was clearly defined, and it wasn't impossible. And weaker teams that had less talent have found a way to get in the playoff. I think famously of the 2015 Michigan State team, who on talent and how good they were probably shouldn't have been in the playoff, and then they got smoked by Alabama. But you couldn't deny them because they had went on the road and beat two top 10 teams and then beat a top 5 team in the Big Ten championship, so they earned their way in. I just think that the whole debate, there's going to be a lot of tears on one side, and I don't really have a ton of sympathy, because it was pretty clearly defined what they needed to do, and both of them, if Ohio, kind of fell short of seizing their own destiny. What do you guys think? Are you guys split, or you guys have one mind on this?
Yeah, being an Ohio State fan, I'm not sure what the other boys think, but exactly. But I'm an Ohio State fan, not my favorite college football team, but I definitely think that a 2-loss team is gonna have trouble getting to the playoffs any way you dice it, just because of just the fact that there's all these other great teams, and the committee has to look at all your losses. And then when you look at Ohio State's losses, you're going to look at an Iowa, not even the Oklahoma loss, because that's hard with Oklahoma going to be fighting to get in. But you have that Iowa loss, which was by like 30, I believe, or something in that range, and they just looked awful. And that's an Iowa team that's bad this year. So I wouldn't even give Ohio State much of a shot. I think people are being a little bit too generous just based on name brand. Like after that loss, I feel like you can't really even put them in the playoffs. They haven't really even dominated other competition that well. I mean, the Michigan game, I don't fault them, because that's like one of the biggest rivalries in football. But you got teams like you just have their whole schedule. They really just never dominated like as well as you would see like an Alabama beating like Vandy by 60 or stuff. Like Alabama just looking like the dominant. I don't even like Alabama, but I just have to. I think Ohio State's getting a little bit too much credit there. I think Alabama would definitely win out in that scenario just because of that awful Iowa loss. And and trust me, like I know about unworthy teams getting whooped in like a playoff or championship situation, because I'm a Notre Dame fan. The most in that 2012 game, that 2012 national championship game against Alabama was not the best. But so I feel you on the Michigan State front.
But both those teams, you know what I mean? Like here's what I think of the beauty. I mean, the Notre Dame thing was pre-playoff, but the fact still holds. When I view the playoff, it's about the teams that earned their way in.
Oh, yeah, Notre Dame completely earned it in that 2012.
It's the 4 best teams. And I could probably sit here on the phone and say, you know what? Alabama and Ohio State are 2 of the 4 best teams in the country. I would probably say just talent-wise.
Yeah, I could say that.
You go up and down those rosters, but to me, in my opinion, that's not what it's about. If you don't earn it on the field, you don't earn the right to play in the playoff, and that's tough luck. So, I mean, if we wanted to do just the 4 best teams, we could sit here and we could outsource the job to Las Vegas, and they could give us the 4 best teams in college football and do a fine job with it. But then why play this season?
Exactly.
Yeah, Nick, I appreciate the little shot at Vandy right there. But before I
called that game.
You should tell them our favorite teams.
I said Vanderbilt will lose by 60 as an exaggeration, or was it 50? Was it 49-0? Oh yeah, I said they would lose by 60 in exaggeration because Mike's a Vanderbilt fan, but I actually was right.
Almost. At one point.
That's
Miles,
so funny.
give us your take about the Buckeyes' playoff chances, and then I'll give mine.
Well, I just want to say I completely agreed. I had a question, so you can go first if you want.
All right. So my take on Ohio State, I think the only way that they get in over Alabama is if they beat Wisconsin convincingly. So by over probably 28, 30
I say
points.
30, yeah.
Yeah, I think they
You
have
guys need a card. Yeah, you need Cardell to come back and put up 59.
Yeah,
That was
put
insane.
Yeah, do a
That was
I still remember watching
Alabama
that.
to Vandy, but I
What?
fainted to Wisconsin.
Cardale just went off those last 3 games.
I know, and a
second.
shutout too by the defense.
That's
That was
insane.
insane. But yeah, I think that the only way Ohio State leapfrogs Alabama is if they do win by like 30 plus, and then I would have no problem giving an Ohio State team who just beat an undefeated Wisconsin team by 30 plus points the playoff spot over a one-loss Alabama team who the last time we saw lost convincingly to Auburn. But I do disagree on your Oklahoma point. I believe if Oklahoma loses and Ohio State wins, I think Ohio State would pass Oklahoma in the playoff rankings. I know that Oklahoma went in to Columbus and beat down the Buckeyes, but I don't see Oklahoma losing to TCU at all. But I think if Oklahoma lost to TCU, I would have a really hard time putting Oklahoma in above Ohio State as both being 2-loss teams. I think their resumes and big wins would go to Ohio State. I think everything would be in Ohio State's favor except for the head-to-head matchup. And I know head-to-head matters a lot, but when everything else is on one team's side, I think you have to take Ohio State in that situation.
Well, head-to-head beginning of the year, too. That's a big key with that. So if you want to make the argument for that, the head-to-head beginning of the year, they're pretty generous when it comes to that.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I think that you're right in that the committee would put Ohio State over Oklahoma in their rankings. I would just say if I was on the committee, I would probably be the one who was a little bit annoying pushing that head-to-head because that's pretty hard. I mean, that game was on the road. You win at Ohio State. That's not an easy place to play, not an easy place to win. I would have a real sticking point. I don't think it's going to come down to that. But when I said that, that's just to illustrate the fact that Ohio State has vulnerabilities that go beyond just the immediate of Alabama sitting there. They have the vulnerability of Oklahoma and at least that conversation being had. You know, because the committee won't gloss over it. Like if they're weighing those two teams, they have to look at the head-to-head and consider it. So I think that it just. When it goes back to Ohio State's margin of victory, you have a point about that. If they go out there and they just boat race Wisconsin 45-7, you could see them in the playoff. The bad news, if you're a Buckeyes fan, I don't see that happening. Wisconsin's got a very legit defense. They slow the game down. They're good against the run. Barrett, for all the good qualities Barrett has. He's a real liability. Some days he just does not have it. I don't see him going out there and throwing for 350 yards on Wisconsin. So we'll see what happens. What's great about the playoff is there's a chance none of this matters, and the teams just that control their own destiny all win, and then we don't have any debate on Sunday, and people have just spent a lot of breath and time and energy talking about the sport for no real reason. That's kind of what I hope for, because I'm a big 14 playoff guy. I don't want it to go to 8, and I think more often than not it works itself out in a pretty reasonable, straightforward way.
Yeah, in that situation you would have Wisconsin winning, Oklahoma winning, and then the ACC and SEC champion would be in the playoff, and that would be the simplest thing. And Alabama would be out in that situation. But Miles,
that would be amazing.
Well, actually, you kind of took my question away. I was going to say, what's your opinion on an 8-team playoff? And I'm not going to get into that with you if you do not agree. But
No. Listen, I'll tell you. I mean, the 18 playoff, the reason why I'm a little bit throwback in the way I view college football, because I think, you're going to say this is crazy. I didn't think the BCS was a terribly bad system. I thought that more often than not, they got it right. If you took care of your business, you won all your games, you would be in the BCS championship game if you were, if you're a major program. I also, it's gonna blow you guys' mind. You're gonna show my age here. I also didn't hate the system where you were the number one team. Say you were Nebraska and you went and you played in the Orange Bowl against number 4 Florida State in the last game of the season, and it wasn't a true national championship game. But if you won the game and you were number 1 and you won against another quality opponent, the voters would put you number 1. I know this is probably just a crazy concept, but
They would be the national champions then?
More often than not, it worked out. And you may not have had a true national championship game, but you had a number 1 team, and you had a national championship, and more often than not, it worked out.
So going into the game,
sorry, go ahead.
that's an interesting point. Going into the game, they wouldn't know it was the national championship game until.
So you would have like the Orange Bowl and the Rose Bowl. So like if the top team was from the Big Ten and the fourth team was from the Pac-12, but then the second team was from the ACC, the second team would go to the Orange Bowl, and then the top team would go to the Rose Bowl, and they wouldn't play each other.
Oh wow!
So it didn't always work out. Like I can tell you, for instance, like you would get a team like Notre Dame could be number 1. And they may play Georgia Tech, who was maybe number 9 in a bowl. And if Notre Dame won that game, they would retain their number 1 ranking, even if number 2 was, say, Florida, and they played, let's say, Colorado. Back when Colorado was dominant, they would still give it to Notre Dame. So we're going way back. I think that our systems have always kind of worked, and we've just tried to tinker to improve the game. I'm not so sure we have. But I have liked the 14 playoff more than I thought it was. I was kind of against it to begin with. But 4 is the perfect number because it makes every game super important. You have a very small margin for error, which I think you need in college football. Every game should matter. One loss should be able to ruin your season. And then you get the debate over like we're doing now, the debate over the 4th, 5th, and 6th teams. I am not one of those people who feels very sorry for the teams that get left off, because everybody has a chance to control their own destiny and get there outside of like a UCF. And I don't really want to get in the weeds about the smaller teams. Yeah. But the real major power conference teams, there's this very simple way to get there, and that's win all your games.
Yep.
And if you don't win all your games, lose one, but win your conference championship, you're going to have a really solid chance at it. And I think if we go to 8, I would challenge people who are a proponent of 8 to look back to the last couple of weeks, the games that we've had that have been eliminators per se, and try to imagine that with an 18 playoff, you would be losing a lot of the intrigue there. At the Alabama-Auburn game, yes, I guess it would have mattered for Auburn, but Alabama would still be in. There wouldn't have been that heightened sense going into that game that maybe this could cost Alabama their season. Not a big fan of 8. I do think eventually we will go there, and we will kind of miss it because we're going to have the same arguments about the 9th versus the 8th best team, and at that point we're probably talking like 3 lost teams potentially, and I just think that's kind of crazy, and then you're going to people feel very aggrieved that they didn't get in. I look at the NCAA basketball tournament. There are so many at-large teams. When you see a team complaining and moaning that they didn't get in, they didn't get an 11th seed.
Vanderbilt.
Look, guys, you lost.
I hear that from my
it's a little silly.
I hear that from my co-host all the time. Michael always complained that Vanderbilt's at large kicking in.
Last year we set the record for most losses to make the NCAA tournament as an at-large. But a couple things on your points. I didn't like the BCS because it used like some formulas from the coaches poll and the AP poll, and just consistently we have seen how much of a joke those polls are, and how individual voters sometimes seem like they don't pay any attention to the sport of college football. When you look at their polls, I know somebody does like AP poll ballot, and like they look at what people say, and like some of the stuff is just so ridiculous.
Yeah, but I agree with him. He said the product was usually the product of the formula usually worked out.
It eventually worked out. And then for going up to an 18 playoff, I love college football, and I am not totally sold on an 8-team playoff, but college football, like you mentioned with college basketball takes 68 out of 300-something teams to play for the national championship, while college football takes 4 out of, I mean, you can argue 128 teams, but really it seems like the committee only values the Power 5 and Notre Dame, which they know that I've been a big UCF fan. I had them as one of my 2 favorite teams that were unranked preseason and have been arguing for them to be in the top 10 since like week 5 or 6 now. But college football only has 4 out of 128 Division I teams make the playoffs, and I think that's such a small percentage compared to every single other sport that we have. Like in professional sports, NBA, over half the teams make the playoffs. In the NFL, you have 30-something%. I just think it's kind of weird how college football is so far away from everyone else.
If you want the national championship to be a game of injured men, then we can make it.
Well, the thing too, though, is that
listen, you say it's weird. I say that's what makes college football great. I'm
Exactly.
really reluctant to try to change the sport, which is probably my favorite one outside of baseball, to make it like every other sport because it is special. I think that the too many teams make the pro playoffs. I don't see the push to make it more like something that's not as good of a product. And going back to the NCAA basketball tournament, fun. We all love it. I will go to my grave saying it's a terrible way to determine a national champion. I mean, if you really wanted to determine a true national champion, you have to give some incentive to the top 16 or 8 teams in the country to give them real buys until later in the round.
Yeah.
So they get one game in the second round against the 10 seed doesn't derail their national championship experience or their hopes. I know it's fun and we all love it. I just think, like, if you look at it just totally.
Oh, for sure.
Outside of emotion, it's a terrible way to judge a national champion. I would say that college football does a much better job because the barrier for entry into that playoff is so narrow and so hard to pass through. I don't think we talk about. I don't think that a 6 or a 9 and 7 NFL team winning the Super Bowl. Yeah, that's a great story, and they earn it. I don't know. To me, that's not the best team. And I know that it makes for a great story. I just think that like over a 16-game season, the 15-1 team is likely the much better team, and I think they should get a greater reward. But that's just my opinion. I think if you went to an 8-team playoff, if you didn't do home field advantage, which I don't think logistically they can do on short notice, you would be looking at a situation where what's really the benefit of getting the 2 seed or against getting the 7 seed? Any team you're going to play in the 18 playoff is going to be awesome on a neutral field. Like there's no real benefit to get the 2 or the 3
Exactly.
as opposed to the 6 or the 7. And it's like what are you going to see for teams?
Ohio State and Alabama would also always make an 18 playoff. Like, you would always have them making that just with their brand. Especially if you could get 3 losses, you're not going to have an Ohio State or an Alabama team losing 3 losses anytime soon. So, I mean, you would just see the same teams. And, I mean, Big 12 would be happy, I guess, because they wouldn't be left out as much. But, I mean, it would just be – the Big 12 fans probably wouldn't be happy. You know, they would probably argue about some other team not making it.
3 teams in the playoff out of 8.
Yeah, so I don't know. I tend to agree with you on most of the stuff that you say about college football too. With the 4 team. I mean, the intrigue is like no other. Every sport. I mean, college football seems to be more interesting than the NFL a lot of the times, especially for me. So I would tend to agree with you on what makes college football work, and I definitely think it's the slim chances of making the playoffs and going farther. So I think that causes a lot of great drama towards the end of the season. That's always fun.
Yeah, all right. We got about 5-10 minutes left. Do you guys want to switch up to like NBA or college basketball with him? Take the first question, either Nick or Miles.
I think the NFL, I think football, like what we've been talking about football has been, I mean, pretty good. You want to continue? I mean, I think that we'll be going into like a lot more deeper subjects that we don't have time for.
Yeah, I have one more question for Miles. Do you have anything?
No, go ahead.
So, as a Michigan State fan, how do you see the Spartan season really just playing out? I thought that They're the second best team in the country, along with Duke. I thought that game was two best teams in the country, and as you saw what they did in North Carolina, it was just so impressive. How do you see the Spartan season playing out as they have really high expectations this year, which they haven't had in the past couple of seasons coming in preseason?
Yeah, there's no doubt this is Tom Izzo's most talented team ever. He has players like he's never had before. They've never had a Miles Bridges. They've never had a Jaren Jackson. And the depth of this team is just staggering. There was Cassius Winston, the sophomore point guard, who fairly unheralded. The game against UConn the other night, he just took over, scored. Every time down the court, he was going in for a layup. Nick Ward, they just have all this talent. They have all the potential in the world. They are turning the ball over too much. That's a real problem for them. Izzo he's got some work to do figuring out a rotation. There's a blessing in having 10 really superior college basketball players on your team, and there's also a curse because you have to figure out a rotation. You have to figure out who plays in the key minutes and who you can trust out there. I will tell you that in like Michigan State collective, there's never been belief in a team like there is for this one. Izzo, for all his success over the years, has taken kind of a rough product and pounded it and beat it down during the season, then rounded it into form in March and made the Final Four with some really bad teams. I mean, I can tell you, he's made the Final Four with teams that in the tournament they didn't have a guy who could dribble. He's made the Final Four with walk-ons playing positions. It's usually ugly, and this is a totally different scenario for them. The Duke game, I will say, I think it was a major wake-up call because Duke played without their best player who got injured early on, and the Blue Devils murdered Michigan State on the offensive glass, which, if you know anything about Michigan State basketball, that is the pride and joy. Rebounding. I'm sure every ESPN broadcast that's ever been done talks about the war drill, where the basketball players put on the football pads and fight for rebounds. It's the go-to B-roll there. So looking at this season, the sky is the limit. They play against another top 5 opponent, Notre Dame, tomorrow night, I believe. I expect them to win that game and win easily. And this is a situation with Michigan State. It's tough to look at their schedule and see losses on it because they will be the most talented team on every game going forward. But it's never that easy. There will be a slump coming up where they lose 2 games in a row that they're not supposed to lose, and how they respond to that will be interesting. Miles Bridges coming back just changed everything. He was told to go to the NBA by Izzo. Izzo couldn't get him to go. He's wired a little differently than a lot of players. He wanted to come back to win a championship, and when you have that kind of determination from your best player and leader, a guy who's going to step in the NBA and be a superstar immediately. I mean, this guy is he's even better than he's showing in college. Once he gets to the NBA and has more room to operate, it's going to be pretty scary. I don't know. I gotta say, I fight getting too optimistic because the last time I felt so good about a team was the first round loss to Middle Tennessee. I thought that team had all the talent to win a national championship, and I hadn't felt like that for 15 years. And then they went out and lost to a 15 seed because Middle Tennessee made literally every shot they took, which can happen in college basketball. So personally, I'm trying not to get too high and excited about it. I just kind of want to enjoy watching a team unlike I've ever seen come through, and just appreciate it because that they're going to be a lot of them will be going pro after the season. It is kind of a pit stop to see what it is to be a Kentucky or North Carolina or even more recently Duke fan, and I got to say it's pretty nice. It's pretty nice to have that amount of talent at your fingertips.
I personally love Miles Bridges in college, but I don't see NBA really talent superstar there. But definitely
Really?
it would. Yeah, I think he's probably the most athletic player in college. But I just see too much Julius Randle. There's a tweener role. The only one. I mean, the good thing is the only one that's ever really succeeded in that role in the NBA is Draymond Green. He's from Michigan State, so. I mean, maybe Izzo or maybe they have they know how to coach those guys to be tweeners, but I definitely think Michigan State is super talented this year. It's funny that you say that it's nice to feel like how it is with Kentucky too, because it seems like those guys are taking all the talent. So Miles Bridges coming back really did just change everything for that team. Like having a sophomore that talented is so much different than having anyone else because they just look 10 times more comfortable with the 10 times more talent that they have over everyone else. So I'm excited for Michigan State. I'm glad that you got a team in them that's really good that you can root for.
Yeah, I have Bridges, I think, 7. I'd probably have him on my NBA draft big board behind the clear top 5, and then I'd have Colin Sexton at 6. But Michigan State just, yeah,
What do you
they're
say
so
about his
talented.
NBA output?
I mean, I think it's going to take time for him to develop in the NBA.
Yeah.
I mean, but I have him 7 in a class that's pretty top heavy.
Yeah, it's deep.
Where there's not, I wouldn't say there's as much depth as last year's class. I think last year's class had a lot more impact
definitely.
players in the
Oh,
teens
yeah.
and
Last year's
20s
class was next level.
than this
That was
year's
like
class
top 20
does.
picks for.
But yeah, still having him top 10. I think he's a consensus top 10 pick according to everybody. He's still a fantastic player. But yeah, Michigan State, they made the Final Four. I remember they were a 7 seed, and they beat, I think, Virginia and then somebody else on their way to the Final Four. And then they got just Louisville, and then they got killed by Duke in the Final Four. And I actually had Michigan State going to the Final Four that year, and I just watched that Virginia game. I think it was clear that they weren't the better team, but Virginia shot like 24% from the field. So I kind of got lucky on that pick, but
Here's what I'll say about Bridges. I think that you might be right. He might be. I see him as like a much more athletic Josh Smith, which is not. Josh Smith when he was athletic and when he was interested,
right.
and he wasn't just shooting 22 footers from the outside, was a fantastic player. I think Bridges can guard virtually any position. I think he could go to the NBA. I think he could guard LeBron right now, as well as almost anybody. I think that he has that size and speed. And what I will say about him is he might not have the best NBA career of anybody in this class, but he has the least risk associated with him. Like, you know what you're going to get. He's not going to go to the NBA and be bad. Like, you've seen a body of work from him that he'll be able to play immediately. He's not going to have growing pains, and he's going to be able to contribute right away.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely.
I mean, he knows how to play basketball, and he's not going to be a bust. There's no way. He might not reach that. He might not be a perennial all-star, but he will be a guy who's in the league forever and contribute. And I would say that's somewhat rare to see in college. And maybe that's what's most impressive about him is that you know this guy is a sure thing of being above average quality NBA player for a long time, even if he's not a superstar. Like, you just don't have any thought in the back of your mind that he's not going to work out.
Yeah, that's what makes I definitely think that he will stay in college helped him with that, like his NBA output long term, and I hope that it starts. I don't know. I don't think it will because just the lure of money now in the NBA is just huge. But it just makes college basketball a lot more fun. Even just having one more non-freshman that's really talented is really fun to watch. Like I kind of see like a little bit of Barkley in him in college for what he looks like, and I wish that a lot of those freshmen could stay longer and like we could see what those guys would look like in college because it would be crazy. Like even guys that are in college right now or NBA right now that are not looking good, like Alonzo, Brandon Ingram, like people like that, they would be like amazing in college right now. So wish they would have stayed longer. It would have made it more fun. But I think we're wrapping up. Any final questions?
No, just to your point, Wade Baldwin. Like, I wish.
Wade Baldwin, shut up.
Literally, when this dude declared for the NBA draft, I was like, wait, what? He's a first-round pick. As a Vandy fan, I was not in on Wade Baldwin as an NBA player. And
think about the players who have gone. Think about the players who have gone like early in the draft, where you've just been like that guy, and then he never turns out to be a guy. My point is that like. Stack Bridges up against any of those guys, and you're like, okay, I feel comfortable with this guy.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah, Baldwin already was cut from an NBA roster while he could still have eligibility at Vandy. It was such a shame, but that'll wrap it up for this episode of FHS Season Tickets. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like and also subscribe for more season ticket videos.
Peace.